Okay, this is Stu. We're going back in the day with Pete. How's it going, Pete?
Good, Stu. Looking at what my recollections are in the 60s, growing up in Sydney, and the idea is, well, were there gangs?
And you, okay, so you grew up
Cogra boy.
Cogra, okay. So that's pretty close to Sydney's most southern beach?
Yeah, pretty much. And we used to go surfing at Cronulla.
Okay. And so this is where the gang thing comes in. Like, a lot of people think gangs are a fairly recent phenomena.
Yeah.
But in fact, they're not.
I think they're no. I reckon that's right for sure. And if you start trolling through history as you might, there were gangs in the streets of Rome. There were gangs in the streets of London. And I remember growing up in the 50s and 60s and seeing newsreel shots of young blokes looking a bit cruising for a bruising and sort of wrecking theatres, in the movie houses in England, and that was that's a gang.
They were called the Teddy Boys?
I reckon they were, yeah. So and that's a spin-off of the kind of gangster world that you get in London, and yet, of course, that stuff could be happening and was happening in Australia from time to time. I wasn't there, but I've certainly seen that around the place. It's funny, when I think of gangs, here's a perspective. It sort of came along as important to us because of, I reckon, the youth culture thing that came end of the 50s and in the 60s. And even when you're watching something as twee as Grease, that's about gangs. And why? It's because it happened, You can do a Hollywood romantic version of it, but the real deal was there somewhere.
It's like Happy Days.
Of course, that's right. Join the gang.
There's quite a few episodes on YouTube that I've just recently discovered.
Yeah.
And I've been watching quite a few. Hang on, I might just reposition your mic so you can...
Oh, you can hear me then.
Facing each other.
Yes, okay. All good. Yeah. The interaction. All good.
Yeah.
No problem.
Okay, even though we've got like a microphone rack sort of thing.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. Something to headbutt. No, we don't do that. But I interfaced with a little bit more... we used to go to the beach at Cronulla, and you could hitch out to Cronulla from Cogra. That was all right. That was a good way to do it. Meet people, meet new friends. But otherwise, we caught the train. Certainly caught the train back on a Sunday afternoon. And the funny thing was, in the 60s, let's say about 63, 64, there was this thing about if you like, the last train out of Cronulla on a Sunday afternoon. Well, the one that the surfers catch, so they get home before dark.
Okay.
And that was, if you like, the 4 o'clock train from Cronulla, heading back up the Illawarra line to wherever, and it got a bit of a reputation because the Surfies would be, the fair few Surfies on board, but then the Rockers had come in. Yeah, so here we've got the Surfies and the Rockers, not to be confused with the Mods and the Rockers in England, or in fact, yes, confuse them because those are the same thing.
So were the Rockers sort of contemporary rockers with their sort of quiff-style hairdos and
just enough of that down there, and this was before we started to look in the mirror. So yeah, there were just enough of guys who looked enough like that. But the funny thing about Cronulla is the old Shire, mate. Even some of the Surfies look like that, I've got to tell you.
Right.
So the swept back hair, the cookie burns look, or the Brill cream look. Yeah, I can think of a lot of surfers who look like that. Don't worry about the Rockers. And the other really funny thing about that, and it's almost like, am I the only person who remembers this, that at the head of the Rockers was an enigmatic character. I mean, stop using those big words, but a red-headed guy named Billy Elliot, freckles, well-built, wearing a leather jacket, and he was the leader of the Rockers.
And so did they ride motorcycles?
No, mate, they had a train ticket like me, or they didn't, as the case may be.
Yeah, right.
And so, hey, they might have been going to Gymea to get back on their bikes, but they were kind of... So what age were we? Well, I was 15, I know that, and they would have been a couple of years older, but, sort of still all part of the kids' scene, but a bit serious on the train, and there were fights. And I've looked that other perspective, and if you like, this is where I can sort of back myself and say, oh, I'm a lover, not a fighter. But what I'm saying is, I remember talking to Billy Elliot and just have a chat. If you like, I'm a surfie, he's a rocker. Yep. But in the right circumstances, we're just all having a chat, and it's all good fun. But there'd be other people get on the train cruising for a bruising, and it's on. And so I saw 2 or 3 big fights on the 4 o'clock Cronulla train coming home after a big day of the surf. And that's, if you like, my big experience with what I would call, gangland wars. They weren't really wars. It was a wee bit, sort of quiet compared with the famous Cronulla riots of whatever it was, 8 years ago or something, when bad guys on both sides seemed to be
So back in those days, the fights would have gone until their natural ending, however that would have been. There would have been no CCTV and like guys meeting you at the next platform.
All that, and it's also true, and this is true of human nature. 80% of the fights were I'll push you, you push me, and we're just wondering what to do next.
Okay.
And just occasionally there was a fight where someone had the ability, and it was one-way traffic, and someone got wasted.
So some people actually did get quite hurt.
Yeah, and not to the extent that I think sort of the next week the coppers were on the train, but there was just a little hint of some people got into deeper water than I ever did.
So when you used to hitch from Cogra to the Nulla, did you leave your boards at Cronulla somewhere?
Yeah, that was the idea. You left your board at Cronulla, or you knew who to borrow one off. And I remember in the about 64 or 65, one of my mates, I borrowed his board, and so the story goes, later his board couldn't be found, and I got accused of being, the person who pinched his board or did the wrong thing. And I had the San Susie boys after me, and I had a famous fight on Cronulla Beach with one of the San Susie boys, and I came out of that pretty good. I gave a pretty good account of myself. But here's the thing. One of them had a mate who was really a good fighter, and he took on one of my other mates, and he wasted him. So I didn't really, if there was any hint there of aren't I clever? No, it all came out very bad. So that gangland war, is that gangland war? That's just silly surfies, doing stupid things, and that happens everywhere.
So say if there was a big concert in town. Say
go to Surf City for the surfers, or go to what was it? The other place where the Easy Beats played. There was the Cave or something like that.
Oh, okay.
In the early 60s.
Was there like Checkers or something?
That's a bit after
Well,
sorry, that was there, but by that time, Cat Stevens was doing Checkers at my God, $25 a ticket. That's far too expensive.
Yeah.
that we all got a bit affluent or something like that.
Yeah, right.
But before that, so again back in that southern Sydney area. We'd go to the Rivoli at Hurstville on a Saturday night, or some similar place, and the action would be on. And I was also in the CYO, which was the Catholic Youth. Why? Because you could pull birds there. Of course, that's sort of why. That's why you did those things.
The sexually repressed Catholic girls.
That's right. Yeah.
Compared to the sort of loose Protestants.
Yeah. And when you were a sexually repressed Catholic boy, that seemed pretty good to me. They were good stakes. So all that was going on, and again, and this is let's be clear here. I'm remembering more individual incidents kind of stuff rather than being involved in any real big gangland war the sort that maybe, wouldn't it be awful to be in that, which comes from, maybe other places or other cultures or something.
I think the second podcast I did, I had a guy, Bruce, who was from Cronulla.
That's right, we talked, yeah.
And he used to leave, he mentioned that he left his board in this specific spot that everybody... or shed or something that everybody left their boards in. Oh, that's
dangerous in Cronulla.
Okay, even back then.
Having said that, there might have been some rule of thumb that he and his mates worked on. It was a relatively safe place, but I think... and especially coming with that experience I had. That it's a bone of contention if you haven't got it nicely, safely locked up, key in your hand sort of stuff.
So was there rivalries between the surfers from Cogra and the surfers from like Cronulla, like that sort of local rivalry that kind of exists now?
I think there is a thing. Don't worry about the Rockers, mate. The Surfies can have plenty of fights amongst themselves. Yeah. There's always that going on. I don't think we ever got in a bad time from being from Cogra. There was always that thing. We used to look down upon Blacktown surfers. What's a Blacktown surfer? He's got a good car, he's got a board on top of it, he wears desert boots and a sloppy Joe, but he doesn't go on the surf.
Okay.
Now, I reckon there's no such person, but we had this vision of there being such people around, so we used to speak with,
with forked tongue.
With looking down kind of words on the Blacktown surfers.
Okay.
Poor buggers from Blacktown. They probably outdid us on a number of occasions.
So the Rockers were from the western suburbs, or was there Rockers in Cogra?
But there'd be Rockers in Cronulla. I think this idea that the Rockers come from another suburb is there'd be enough of them around to say, well, that's true, but don't discount the fact that there are a few people in Cronulla who don't surf, and Cronulla, as indeed Cogra was, it's more working class than high class.
Yep.
And therefore you've got a good range of people. Thank God. Wouldn't it be awful coming from Turramurra or somewhere like? I mean, really, this was quite a vibrant place to live.
Yep.
And you did get a slice of life. I mean, thank God.
Yeah.
And so now these days, and Cronulla gets that mark of disrespect because of what happened when there was a Cronulla riot, that was sort of a bit racially
race-based.
Yeah, and yes, I've heard the stories how that was started because there was a Lebanese gang that came and heavied the young lifesavers at South Cronulla. I've heard that story.
Yep.
And yet when I see what happened in the so-called riot, there were some nasties there who they were going way beyond any sense of don't do this to us again. This was just it was kind of warfare.
So, I mean, the current Cronulla riots, or the current
the recent ones,
like a lot of those guys were from Bankstown.
I think that's right, but Bankstown. That's like saying they were stirred up because of a Lebanese gang that came from Lakemba or somewhere like that, or Canterbury, Bankstown sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But that's got a little bit of the old if they don't come from the beach, there's something wrong with them.
Yeah. So was Cronulla always the beach for people at Bankstown? Because Bankstown's kind of like that sort of major inland.
I'm not an expert on that. Coming from Cogra, it was certainly our beach because it was easy to get to, relatively easy. And otherwise we were looking out on Botany Bay. There's no surf there.
Yep.
And we weren't eastern suburbs lads. We didn't go for that sort of caper.
We had to be on the north side of Botany Bay to be in eastern suburbs.
Pretty much. And even in the eastern suburbs, you can go classy to Bondi. You can go and rough it with the guys from Maroubra. So that's all pretty funny. And I only ever tasted that occasionally. I certainly I'm no expert on it. Cronulla was the place for us to go. And it was it was comfortable with me. It didn't feel like I was somewhere where I had to put on the P's and Q's, or indeed somewhere I felt alienated. It was just pretty normal.
Yep. Okay. Did you when you got old enough to get a car, did you sort of venture further afield?
Yeah, I reckon we did. And I remember in the later 60s, we used to enjoy going over to Manly or Narrabeen and finding the spots over there. And again, it was like going to another country in one way. But on a Sunday to go surfing over there in winter, was there lots of spots, check it out. And you might see midget. Good Lord, you might see midget.
So was there any north? You guys are from the south. Piss off, come, go back to your own beach type thing. Was there any of that sort of?
Well, no, I never came across that.
Okay.
In the surfing thing, and it's a bit like being on the north coast, even paddling out at Angara. There's those who do, and those who talk about it. So if you're athletic and good at it, you just get in there and do it.
Yeah.
And the people who are doing all the talking, they're not really surfers anyway.
So the whole surf rage term basically came from the incident at Angara, where was there any sort of?
I think that's right in the sense that
rage. Was that a term before that when that young got smashed in the?
Well, that's. I think that's just what happens sometimes when the wrong personalities confront each other.
Yep.
And we all know that written on the rock at the pass at Byron Bay is locals only, and so there is that aspect of it. And 20 years ago, if we're in the surf, even around here, people would get browned off at the Japanese guys in the water. Why? Well, because they're Japanese guys.
Yeah.
There's always that thing too about the board riders not liking the boogie boards because they sit in the sweet spot and wait for a wave, whereas we'd be on the wave 5 metres before, and apparently you're in the way of my sweet spot. That sort of stuff that happens, and that's. But that's not gang warfare. That also
happens between longboarders and shortboarders as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, bring it on.
Yeah.
So the surfy thing is all about, selfishness or limited resources or only one wave amongst 10 people or whatever it is. Again, not really gang warfare. And the other thing about gang warfare is that there's that aspect in Sydney. And again, I'm just looking at it. I wasn't part of it. But if you played rugby league, there's an aspect. There's just a suggestion that that there'd be gangs of guys who play rugby league who like to go and punch out someone else who's not as tough as them. And I remember in Sydney in the early 60s, we went to King's Cross for a bit of action or whatever we were doing, and we were walking down William Street, and there were these, maybe we were walking up William Street, and these guys were coming the other way, and they were just hitting anyone they could see. And I thought, well, that's a day out for someone. So they got a slightly different idea on what they're doing on a Saturday night. But
a similar thing happened to me and my friends.
Well, there it is.
Like the late 80s.
And that's what we kind of think is gang warfare. That's our experience of it, where something else, and to change subjects, but to still talk about footy, those sort of almost ethnic allegiances that you see a bit in soccer in the round ball game, they're there. I didn't really ever well, I didn't suffer from that, but you see it around occasionally, and you sort of, and in one sense, you say, "Oh, isn't that nice? They're kind of committed to the old country or the way of life." Well, it's okay till the flares start going off, or that sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, that sort of that national thing was what basically got soccer off the ground in Australia, up to a point where they realised they had to eradicate that national identity.
They had to step up,
for the different teams.
But someone else could easily say, well, that's okay because Australia got off its arse, by inviting those sort of people there and taking the good with the bad, and their rough edges would get worn off after a while. And the Vietnamese who came, and the parents were all working 4 jobs, and the kids were all running wild on the streets. That all comes from, especially for white Australians, from the thought that, the Tang dynasty or the Fu Manchu gang, or we love this idea of an Asian gang. Oh, geez, it's much better than a good old Aussie gang.
I mean, I think all that got tied up with the heroin.
Yeah, that was famously the thing that if you went out to the particular Cabramatta railway station, that was as good a place as any to buy your drugs. And yet that changed after all, a little bit of police work, but probably more community work. And all of a sudden, Cabramatta's the place to go for food and for a good Sydney day out.
Well, I think it's a generational thing, maybe, like the kids of the parents that came here as refugees. They sort of become a little bit wayward for whatever reason, bit disjointed from the rest of society. But then, like a lot of those kids that would have been around back then selling the heroin would have kids themselves now, and they're the kids that are coming through as teens, and they are much more part of Australian society rather than being refugees or the offspring of the first generation offspring of refugees. By this time, these kids are well and truly identify themselves as Australian by the third generation.
And that's right. And I reckon that's sort of, you might say it's a society dysfunction. Could have been handled better rather than the gang from so and so. The gang from so and so. Sure, they're there for a while, but they'll grow up.
So, what was your first car, Pete?
Oh, Volkswagen, mate. Yeah,
Beetle.
Beetle, go to the beach. One of the ones with the small back window. 59,
the ones that are worth like
$60,000,
$70,000, $80,000.
And we used to laugh when someone would say a Ford Falcon was going to be worth big money. And things are pretty quick when the Volkswagens start to be worth a lot of money. But all good stuff. And you'd always find a German mechanic who'd fix them. And hopefully wouldn't have to visit him more than once a year.
Okay.
And that meant that there was plenty of times I had to push it to start it and all that sort of stuff. But that was good fun.
But they were easy to push.
And all of a sudden we started to go to the Japanese cars. They're a bit harder to push.
Get
them going. What's going on?
And the pedals that come up from the floor in the Beetle rather than that come down from sort of above.
The old chaff cutter, mate. The sound of a Volkswagen, the chaff cutter.
No.
Golden days.
When I was a very young kid, my dad, our family car was a blue VW Beetle.
Oh, look out.
And then we upgraded to a 1973 VW station wagon.
Dear. Isn't that classy? You're almost like the Grand Tour of Europe or something.
Like now you never see them around, and when you do, they're very, very expensive, and they look so nice. People have them decked out so nice.
At one stage, my dad bought a Studebaker, and whatever it was. So any time I could borrow that to go to the drive-in or go and meet a girl, that was the stuff to have. Win them with the car if you can.
It would have had a nice big boot for
back seat. Boot. Yeah, sorry, boot.
Your friends into the drive-in.
That's right. Yeah,
cut down on the cost.
The dicky seat. What's that word again? What's going on? Okay. Anyway, back to the gangs. And, so it's almost like there might be someone you could find around the place who was really in the middle of the gang warfare. I wasn't. But these were just, from a sideline, there was some of this stuff going on.
Yep.
Happily, we survived.
Okay. So did you go to Surf City and do the stomp?
No. My great line is that I was a good boy. I went to Morris Brothers Cogra. I did history, and I was sent by the school to attend the history conference at the King's School at Parramatta. Oh,
wow.
I was really allowed to rub shoulders with the elite, but that was getting a bit boring after a couple of days. But at the end of it, the history conference, we had a band, like a big night out, and we were entertained by Bobby and Laurie and the Easy Beats. So that was I thought, well, this really is history. This is the history you want to see. And so I didn't go to those funny places, the sort of the dance halls.
Okay.
It came to the history conference.
I've seen a fair bit on, like, there's been a clip, I think it's from the National Film and Sound Archive that they've dug up from some, I think it's maybe ABC
an early show or something?
Yeah, an early ABC current affairs program where they're talking about the stomp and how some councils banned it because of worrying about the foundations of the buildings.
Well, that's right.
The kids were stomping.
Well, I can believe that. Yeah. Surf club floors can't, and they're all about 30 years old, so they couldn't stand the.
And I've got to say, there is one guy in that's
jumping up and down,
doing the stomp, and he's definitely he's got the hair. He's got the hair of a rocker. He doesn't have the bleached blonde locks.
And the looks that God's given you sometimes spoke as to whether you went the way of the surfie or the rocker. These things happened. Yeah, all good.
So did you ever did you ever go like Bondi? Did you ever do the Eastern Suburbs beaches once you had a car? Or is it just like kind of, if you're going to go somewhere, you'll go somewhere completely
Eastern
different?
Suburbs was a social day, mate. A social day out. So isn't that funny? I don't ever remember surfing Bondi.
But I guess Bondi was like Pooville back then.
Well, that was always the great joke, wasn't it? That there was an outfall, sewer outfall off Bondi, and the famous Daily Mirror afternoon headline was... outfall fails, local surfers remain undeterred.
Yeah.
and that's true.
Yeah.
And I don't know much about Maroubra or Coogee, and they look like perfectly good places. I don't reckon I've ever been to the Coogee Bay Hotel, which is sort of a bit of a thing that they do out there.
Yeah. No, I've seen some great bands.
North Cronulla pub was perfectly good for me.
Yeah, no, I've seen some great bands at the Coogee Bay Hotel.
And the other thing is the music, and that drew crowds along and all that sort of stuff. So, what did I ever go to? And so I went and saw at Randwick Racecourse the rock opera Tommy, as done by a lot of Australian people, which were good.
Okay.
And that was okay. And they had one of the Who there, who I think was the drummer, but I can't remember what his name was.
Keith Moon.
That'd be Keith Moon, and he came along. He didn't do much, but he didn't have to. He was the sort of the guest artist or the bloke who stands at the back. And Ross Wilson was in that, and probably a few girls of note of that time. Maybe.
So that would have been early 70s?
Yeah, early 70s, yeah.
Okay, so what, you would have been at uni?
Yeah, I was. Okay. Yeah, I was a little law student then.
Okay.
And I did sort of an arts degree, then I went to the army and did national service and came out and did a law degree. I didn't have to do that, but I chose to do that because, I wanted to learn about life or something like that.
Yeah.
So that was good. That was all, way to go.
So are you sort of one of these kind of ex-lawyer / solicitors, whatever, that see all these changes going on in the name of safety and just go, oh my God, how this is really weird.
A little bit of that.
Considering the sort of foundation of law and democracy as you would have learnt about it back then.
Well, everyone, I mean, it's a factor of getting old that you look at things and say, is that going a good way? We're past too many laws. I mean, it's a bit like saying, we always had the 10 Commandments. You've got to do a bit more than that. But what I'm saying is there seem to be a lot of laws these days. And so for people to say, isn't it better to know what's right and wrong? I don't think you can say that anymore. You've got to read what the 1,000 pages are for. And so it's a more complicated world.
So would you say that there are back then there were less laws to, in general terms, save you from yourself?
Yeah.
Whereas now we have lots and lots of laws that are just based on people being saved from their own actions.
So that they talk about the nanny society or something like that. Now, I reckon more than 50% of that is probably a step in the right direction to help people or whatever it is. But there's that aspect of, do you know what to do? No, I couldn't make up my own mind what to do. I have to go and see what the law says. Well, come on,
And so how do you see the role of the police force? How is that changed
that's interesting
in society?
because you've got that spectrum, haven't you, of... they protect us. They're good for society. To the other one, where they're the pigs or something like that. And I certainly don't think that. It's a job no one wants, to be a policeman.
Yeah.
But they do a job that they've got to abide by perhaps not far too many, but a tad too many laws, and they've got to go about it in a way that. If they do it wrong, they're going to be open to challenge or whatever it might be. There's something happening in Victoria at the moment that looks like that's about that big time.
I see a lot. Again, it's sort of a modern phenomena of demonisation of unions and things like that. But you never hear anything about the police union having too much power and the police union being this. This thing.
They always come out and they're a bit aggressive is maybe the wrong word, but we'll use aggressive and. You're not allowed to say anything against them. Woe betide the person who says they've got a bit too much power or stuff like that. But I suppose it's the old story: in the hands of the right copper, there's no problem. In the hands of the wrong copper, it's all bad.
Well, look, I mean, my dad was a copper, and he had a revolver, and he had a short rubber truncheon.
Yeah.
I guess, like any union over the years, the police unions probably fought, if that's the right word, to facilitate the police more effectively and easily being able to do their job.
Yeah. There's going to be a good side of that, a sensible side.
Yeah, absolutely. Then perhaps like the builders union, where up to a certain point, it's great to have safety on work sites, but when you have guys coming in and trashing the place to create an unsafe environment, to if that's what happens, I don't know.
But I agree with you. There's we don't want to see them overstepping the mark in those ways, but on the other hand, there are forces at work who are trying to get them made powerless, so they have no power, and that's wrong too.
Yeah.
So it is, that balance is sort of hard to pick sometimes.
Yeah.
Be it the building workers or the wallopers.
Well, I mean, it seems that in Australia the unions was sort of the basis of the small L Liberal Labor Party.
In the years we grew up, there was we had a lot of time for labour unions, and the people who came out of those areas into politics, like the Mick Youngs and I don't know whoever else you got,
Bob Hawke, and
that sort of stuff. They had street cred, if you like, and these days they're a bit harder to find.
Well, now it's like the party that was
a lot of lawyers there, mate.
Well, the party that was started by the bloody unions are distancing themselves.
And again, that shouldn't be a war. You know, there should be a balance. Both sides get a chance, and there is a balance reached for the benefit of society, rather than seeing one side win at all costs.
Yeah.
But enough of this. They're a different sort of gang.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it's all kind of related in a lot of ways.
That's
you know
right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So when you were, through your time as a solicitor, are you like a prosecuting solicitor or a defending solicitor?
Defending solicitor
both?
most of the time.
Okay.
We occasionally got into a bit of prosecution working for the council or something if there was some health issue or something like that. That was all good fun. But more likely we'd be defending someone who needed legal aid at Maclean Local Court or something like that, and that was a regular once a month, twice a month activity that, kind of we did. We made some money out of, but also, you knew you were sort of helping the helpless.
And did you ever feel? Were you ever at a point where you go like, I can't help this dude?
That would have happened, but that's a bit like saying, oh well, I'd never done what he's done. But there are people there who came from different circumstances in life, so I can understand the point of view. Geez, aren't I lucky? I've never had to live with what he's got to live with.
Yep.
Having said that, he's got you got to say what his options are and tell him that, and get him to make a decision about what's the best way forward or the line of least grief.
Yeah.
And I remember that I said to them, there was a guy who I think what he'd done, he'd gone to the police station and, in his wisdom or otherwise, perhaps for a lack of someone giving him attention, he set fire to something. He got his lighter out and set fire to something, and he was in court and I was defending him, and he had some problems, and I made reference to that to the court and said, look, he's the young fellow should go to drug rehabilitation or something. He's at the crossroads, and where he goes from here, we can help. And the magistrate said, mate, he's gone right through the crossroads. He's gone to jail. So I thought, well, he certainly trumped me on that one.
Yeah. Look, I'm just going to pause it because I have to go and take a leak.
Do your stuff. Well, that's it. I think we've said enough.
How Okay, so let's go back to Cronulla. You were, or Cronulla, Cogra, the Shire.
That's right. Well, Cogra out of the Shire, but not too far out, so all part of the scene.
Do you remember when those kids went missing from Wanda Beach?
Yes. That was
that big?
Why do I remember that? If that was in the mid-late 60s, I remember that was always a factor. The two girls who got wasted at Wanda. I don't remember exactly what happened there, but there was something.
And was that like a thing where
I don't think
were your parents like don't go out? I don't think
if I was a girl, they might well have done that, but no, that didn't come into the scene. That was just something that happened, and Wanda Beach always looked at as a bit of a wilderness if you're the civilised end of Cronulla.
Because that's kind of north of...
Yes, it is. So there was Cronulla Beach, which was sort of a little little cove, Cronulla Point, just off it. Then you'd walk round to North Cronulla, which was the main surfing action.
Yep.
But if you walked further along past what they called Green Hills, I think you got to Wanda.
Yep.
And then beyond Wanda, the bay went round to ultimately where Kurnell is.
Yep.
But there was a sort of a fishing spot, a fishing cove and surfing spot called Voodoo around there.
Oh, okay.
But we're talking, by the time you get where Wanda Surf Club is, it would be a 2 or 3 kilometre walk to Voodoo. So there's quite a large expanse of beach. And if you, I remember for some reason we had a school picnic out Wanda Way, and there are terrific sandhills out there. It's almost like you could go and pretend you're Lawrence of Arabia or something.
I think they might have even filmed Lawrence.
They filmed maybe 40,000 Horsemen or something.
Like
40,000 Horsemen was a movie with Chips Rafferty, again before my time, but I reckon that's right. That was the location.
Yeah, wow.
Now I reckon they're building a bit of real estate out there. The the subdivisions are encroaching on all that, although the petrol refineries out there and
also I think there's a desalination plant for water out there.
They've got all the good gear out there. That's right. Yeah, things we don't really need. Well, maybe we will need one day. I don't know.
So I guess would you consider your life back then to have been like a
life in the suburbs?
Life in the suburbs or life as a beach dweller like we live now?
Yeah, no, not really. Coming from Cogra, you had to sort of jump through a couple of hoops to get to the beach, but that was what we did. That was, the surfing explosion had occurred, and we were attuned to that.
Yep.
And that was all good. Famously in 63 or 64, Midget Farrelly won a contest in Hawaii, and all of a sudden there's going to be a world surfing contest on at Manly, which was in small surf in 64. And what, funnily enough, happened was, of all people, Rex Mossop had just come into the big scene at Channel 7 to talk footy. Yep. But he and his offsider, they actually, made a production of watching the surfing contest.
Yeah, and there was also at one point who competed in John Money, who used to be a coach of Parramatta.
That's right. And remember Johnny Money around the place. Yeah. He was a good surfer.
Wow.
And one of those, if you like, strong little guys who lends himself to surfing pretty well.
So would he have been like one of those footy guys, like
don't remember,
you were talking about? Like, there was footy guys that were surfers, yeah.
Oh, sure. That certainly, and they were strong and physically strong and sort of athletic. So there plenty of them down the old surf.
And they wore their like heavy cotton football jumpers as wetsuits back then, didn't they?
I remember
seen lots of old photos of.
Yeah, and in the early 70s, when I got out of the army, this is sort of thinking back a ways, 71, 72. And we go down to freshwater. So all of a sudden I'm living in Sydney and working in Sydney, and I'm living at Cremorne or somewhere like that.
Okay, so
we'd whip down to freshwater on a sunny, hot afternoon, Friday afternoon or something after work, and you'd see Bobby Fulton there having a surf.
Wow.
And he's built like a brick. So
yeah.
You weren't going to say, get off my wave, mate. No. G'day, Bob, how you going? And a couple of other identities who were footy identities, and so they were well placed in the surfing crowd.
But that was back in the day when, like, you play, like, even the professional. Well,
it wasn't there. So that's. I mean, you're getting to a point there. These are all just normal people. Some of them were very good at football, and they. I mean, I suppose Bobby Fulton, he would have been one of the earliest ones to knock on the door of professionalism, but it wasn't so in our face as it is these days.
But like, if you grew up on the northern beaches, you played for Manly or North Sydney.
Yeah, and back where I came from, St George had the same status.
Yeah, and Cronulla wasn't around.
Not around as a team.
Late 60s?
It came soon enough. Late 60s, and sort of played in a famous grand final against Manly, I think in, let's say, about 72 or something like that, maybe 73.
Oh, okay.
And that was we started this conversation off about gang warfare. Well, the warfare that day was the Cronulla boys did some unspeakable things to the Manly boys, but couldn't win the match.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And so there was, although the protagonists that I remember, there would have been any number of incidents, but Cliffy Watson, who was a Welshman playing for Cronulla, did unspeakable things to the Manly lock, who in fact was an Englishman. So it was almost like, well, those boys bring their bad habits, so we don't really get to.
It was a massively different game back then.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I mean, on one hand,
the violence.
Yeah, it was much more violent.
Yeah,
there was much more there was much more of a variety of body styles playing, whereas now you've basically every bloke who's massive.
Yeah, and got to be speedy and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, and of course, what was happening was the intrusion of the cameras was only just starting to make a real impact, and so whereas in the old days, something happened out there on the field, and no one's really sure what it was, and the referee's not saying much. That's right.
Yeah,
These days, it's repeated 20 times.
Yeah, well, I guess in my lifetime, we've gone from sort of like the instant replay from the 1 or 2 cameras to multiple instant replays from 20 different angles.
We've got to see that again. And of course, I mean, this is cynical. What we've got these days is very good, but people will still make the comment, even the blokes in the box get it wrong, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
look, I mean, I think that happened to Australia in the soccer at the World Cup.
Was we robbed? Well, I hope so. That's traditional.
But it's interesting that with all that sort of sports camera work, did you know that George Greenough actually played a major role in inventing the stump cam?
No idea. I mean, I can imagine him. He did something on a boogie board once, but
no, he actually was a major contributor to.
He had that little
putting a TV camera inside the cricket stump.
How do you get to wicket cam? And the other cams that you get.
Yeah.
It's all good.
So, like, did you used to fish as well back then?
No. Well, there was a time. Yeah, we used to go down to Ramsgate Baths, Sans Souci Baths, and we had hand spears. We made hand spears, so we'd go fishing and catch fish. But I wasn't ever much good at it. And you'd hand spear. You put the prongs on the front, the spears, if you like, and on the bottom you've got something like a bicycle tyre tube that you could sort of tension and then point at the fish and let go, and it would spring out.
So you were diving.
We had a mask on.
Okay.
Nothing fancy, but it was
just a snorkel.
Snorkel. Snorkel. Yeah. So you're down for 30 seconds and try your luck.
Yeah.
Fish were pretty safe when I was around.
I don't do it.
No, but it's good fun. That was interesting.
I don't like knowing what's going on down under there.
Yeah, well, that's like. I mean, I did a PADI course in sort of having the aqualung on, all that sort of stuff.
Wow,
and, and did that in Yamba. That was good fun. But I've never really embraced it. It's another world down there, and it's a fascinating world.
Yeah.
And I remember we did a dive off Lovers Point, and just to go out there and see that iridescence of being under the sea, and no doubt it's helped by good goggles and stuff like that. But it's terrific. It's another world.
Wow.
No big sharks came along, so maybe that helps too.
And there's quite a few wrecks around here as well.
I didn't get to them, but that'd be the go for sure. And those who are into it would know well all the good spots for sure.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Can't do everything, Stewie.
No, certainly not. But well, look, all right. Look, I mean, if you're happy with that, we can pull the pin. And,
that's right.
And
Gov. I don't know nothing else.
Oh, look,
that we can think of.
We could probably go all day.
It's all good.
This is the one that I've been the least prepared for.
Yeah,
but
we got somewhere.
Yeah, no, we've definitely gotten somewhere. And look, thanks very much, Pete. And thanks for listening.
I look forward to hearing. Now, it's a pity we haven't got a murder anywhere there, because we could do a podcast.
A murder?
Yeah, you can have that's what the world is doing these days. All those unsolved criminal things that happen.
Well, we kind of slightly have touched on it.
Well, we must have been close.
I
know nothing about the Wanda murder. No, sorry.
Well, I probably should have asked you on the back of us being a solicitor. Did you ever represent somebody who murdered somebody?
Probably not. If I got caught in the just in the preliminaries or something, that may have been the case, but no, generally. And I think that was so funny in all of my career, and especially being on the North Coast. They don't murder people up here.
Yeah,
not in the good old days anyway.
Or if they do, they're smart enough to be able to do it and get away with it.
Yeah, that's right. No one noticed. All right.
All right.
See you, mate.
Take it easy. Thanks.
I'm making a move.